Okay, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about marketing channels with Matt. So Matt,
Yes.
you got another 50 minutes here.
No problem.
But this is great. And I did want to point out Catherine's schoolhouse in the background.
In the background, I see that.
Okay, take it away, Matt.
All right, thanks. I will. And, before I share my slides, just, in summary, I hope what I've covered with you now is a way to get started very concretely in marketing and to take what seems like a big, gray area, this marketing thing, and turn it into bits and pieces that you can really kind of tackle. So I hope that method, makes sense for you and that you can see how to use it. And, I always have in mind, like I said, this idea of effectiveness or efficiency, which is sales per hour. I think about the hours that you spend on marketing more than the dollars that you spend, because frankly, it's going to be a lot of your time that gets spent. And that's probably the thing that you have the most limitations on, especially if you're putting all your labor into production activities. So I want to share an example that I really love. It's a true story about working on market effectiveness or efficiency. There was a guy that used to work for Cornell Cooperative Extension here in New York State, and then he purchased an already existing farm store down in Pennsylvania. So this was a farm that operated growing bedding plants and vegetables, and then they had their own farm store, like a real store, like they had a bakery section in it, and of course they sold their own produce and bedding plants, and they had coffee and stuff like that in their store. So he told this story at a conference of how he was he bought this operation and he started running it, and he was placing ads in the local newspaper, and he tracked the consumers coming in like with a coupon and a code, so he was tracking his advertising dollars and how many customers it would generate for him at the store. And he figured out that at the current cost of advertising, customers were costing him $5 a piece, right? So he was thinking of buying new customers at $5 a piece with these ads. And as he worked out his budget, he figured out this is just too expensive, right? So he started brainstorming a better way to reach new customers and get them in the store that would cost less than $5 a piece. And here's what he came up with. He went to a nearby BMW car dealership, and he talked with the sales team, all the people that are in sales. And he said, when your customers are taking test drives, if you bring them to my store during the test drive, I'll give you and your customer either a free coffee or a free soft serve ice cream. So he figured out his cost on coffees and ice creams was $1 each. So the sales team actually started doing it. So they started bringing their customers in. And I like to imagine, you take them for a test drive in this car that you want to sell them, and you say, oh, let me get you a coffee, right? So you take them down to the farm store and you get them a coffee. I like to imagine those people walking into that store and looking around and saying, I never knew this was here, right? So by working on a plan, he not only just reached people who read the local paper at $5 a piece, but at $2 a piece, 2 ice creams or 2 coffees, he was reaching people who test drive BMWs. And here we could draw a caricature of those customers, right? But we know that they have good taste, they have some budget to spend, right? So it's a very, very clever execution and a very efficient way for him to use his marketing budget just through some brainstorming and some planning around target customers, reach, message, and so on. And that's a true story that I think is really cool example, and no reason why you couldn't come up with similar examples. As long as you have those marketing meetings at the kitchen table. All right, so I'm going to really shift gears. I just kind of wanted to summarize what I was saying earlier with that anecdote, because it's a favorite of mine. And I have a few others that are like that. But we're going to talk about now really kind of changing gears a bit into choosing market channels and then how to evaluate channels. And I'm going to talk about the market channel assessment tool that I've used with vegetable producers. And I realize, a bunch of you on here aren't vegetable producers, but you're still going to get the same idea of how to assess a channel's performance and then how to make improvements on it. First, let me just introduce the various channels that are available and group them as either wholesale channels or direct to consumer channels. In a wholesale channel, when it comes to food items, you could just think about you're selling it to the person who's not the eater or the end user, whereas in direct channels, you're selling it right to the eater or the end user. So I give you different examples of channels. If you're selling your products to restaurants and grocery stores and distributors, those are wholesale channels. They're going to go on and sell your product again to someone else. In direct channels, we're all familiar with farmers markets, CSAs, farm stands, and even web sales. You're selling your product directly to the consumer. So when you hear about all these various channels, especially if you go to a conference where they have a panel of farmers or store owners and they're talking about their great success in one channel or another. I remember attending a conference years ago where they had maybe Marianne was there too. The speaker was running a wool CSA online, and she talked about her success with this wool CSA. She got me so excited. I don't raise sheep, and I was like, how can I start a wool CSA, right? So it's easy to get energized about the ideas and the opportunities and channels. So this idea that opportunity is knocking, there's all these channels available, and certainly we've heard anecdotes of people really succeeding in one or another: CSA, farmers market, restaurant sales, and so on. So it's exciting to think about the opportunities. And then we have this idea that, people are sharing these stories. So one farmer is going to say to the other farmer, Joe, if you bring your vegetables to the farmer's market, the prices are so high that you can sell $500 worth per hour. And Joe hears the story and says, well, that's great. I'm going to go sell at this market because what it implies here is high prices and great sales. So Joe takes off and he goes to sell at that market, but he doesn't hear the rest of the comments about the market. But it costs $300 a day between fees and parking just to sell at this market. And the market is only for 1 hour per week. All right, so you can sell $500 worth per hour, but now we just found out it's only for 1 hour a week, and we're gonna have to pay $300 in fees. Doesn't sound so great now. Okay, if it rains, no customers will show up. And it takes 12 hours of your labor to prepare and sell at this market. So what we're hearing in these comments are evaluations of these factors that impact the performance of a marketing channel. And you could think about the overall performance of maybe a vegetable variety, where you might hear that they produce numerous tomatoes, but they're small tomatoes. Or you might hear, they ripen very early, but the plant doesn't hold up for the season, right? So we don't really want to choose a channel based on a single factor. We want to think about these multiple factors and find a channel that performs well across all channels. Again, I used plant varieties as an example. You could think about, I guess I like to use cars as examples. You might want to buy a car that has really great miles per gallon on fuel, but when you find out that the seats are very uncomfortable, that's another factor of evaluation, and now that car doesn't look so great. So again, just to take that idea of performance, which is multiple factors combined when evaluating channels. What we hear in the first comment is this idea that prices are high, and it doesn't guarantee, but it implies something about how well we can profit in that channel, because people tend to associate gross sales with profits. Then we're going to hear about the costs associated with selling in that channel. With a farmer's market, it's obvious it's the fee that you spend. With wholesale channels, it might be the boxes that you have to buy, that you lose into the supply chain. And ultimately, every market channel has associated costs for selling in that channel. There's the volume of product that you can sell through the channel in a given amount of time. When we're doing an example with vegetables and fruit, those are perishable. And, especially when it comes to all the vegetable varieties, we're thinking about sort of a 1 week time, because a lot of vegetables are harvested and need to be sold in less than a week. So You pick the unit of time, but the point is to evaluate the volume of product that can be sold in that time, and then the amount of labor that it takes. And this is kind of getting at that gross sales per hour of labor that I've been talking about, but evaluating the amount of time that it takes each week to sell in this channel or to participate in the channel. The risks that come with the channel, and the real risks here are the risk of lost sales, right? If we're going to be investing this time and product in this channel, what's the risk of losing our sales or losing our income from them? So here are 5 of the factors. But what I heard from working closely with farms during the market channel assessment tool project was that there is a 6th factor, which is ultimately the most important factor, and that is lifestyle preferences. So this speaks to how well you enjoy participating in this channel, how well it suits your personality, and yeah, what you're going to enjoy, because ultimately that's going to define the sustainability of the channel and prevent you from getting burnt out if you're doing something that you find stressful. So with market channel assessment tool, what we learned is that there are these moving targets with these factors. A channel can look really great for one factor and then look weak in another. So we have this, we're chasing around this moving target. So just look at wholesale channels compared to direct to consumer channels. Wholesale channels tend to command a high volume of product, but at a relatively lower price, while direct to consumer channels like farmers markets can offer really high prices, but take a relatively smaller volume. So it becomes confusing to immediately say just, well, this channel is better than that channel, right? Because we have this, well, we want high volume and high prices, so which channel do we choose? And in fact, there are a whole bunch of different factors to consider. Like I said, I'm going to be talking through a vegetable example today. So wholesale channels, you don't have to have a huge, crop diversity of 40 to 50 different crops. You can grow 2 or 3, have a lower crop diversity, whereas direct to consumer channels tends to demand having a more wide variety of crops. The degree of customer interaction is relatively high with direct channels, while with wholesale channels, it could be, just emails to the buyer or even text messages to the buyer, and relatively low consumer interaction. Price and volume we covered, and then with produce, the degree to which you need to have a very consistent and clean product is very high. Grocery store buyers expect, all the eggplant in a box to look nearly identical, whereas farmers market customers might actually like having the choice between a small eggplant and a big eggplant, right? So you've got this cleaning, sorting, and packing consistency, which is in high demand for wholesale channels and relatively low. Point being, whatever your product, you have these moving targets when it comes to different details about the channel. So I'm going to introduce Muddy Fingers Farm because they participated in market channel assessment, and I'm going to walk through their example to talk about how we measure each of these factors and use them for decision making. When they first participated was 2009. At that time, they were diversified fruit and vegetable production. They still are. That summer, they were participating in 4 different farmers markets, as well as a CSA with 50 members and sales to 2 nearby restaurants. They had no hired labor. They did have some CSA members that were doing working shares, which means they come and help out for a few hours 1 day a week. And then they had family and friends that would help out on the farm. But basically, it was a 2-person operation. They were going on 2.5 acres. They had 2.5 acres in production any given season, and they're growing over 45 different vegetable crops. So very typical small-scale diversified vegetable operation in 2009. What we did with them and other participants was to collect logs of all their marketing labor, and this is something that you can do. We did it just for 1 week. So record keeping can feel like a real burden and difficult, but what I encourage people to do with record keeping is to pick snapshots. So if you want to track your marketing labor in your various channels, pick 1 week when everything's pretty normal, you're making sales in all channels, and track the amount of labor dedicated to each channel, and you'll have some way of evaluating your contribution to the different channels. During the same period, we collected their gross sales, and because it's easy to capture, also their mileage driving to and from these various channels. And then we asked the farm to rank how well they enjoyed participating in each channel and how risky they thought each one was. So that's really defined by the operator. And then we could weigh the categories. I'll talk about the weights in just a moment. But why do we use labor logs? Labor is probably for these small operations and for yours too, labor will be your largest marketing expense. We did talk about a budget and spending money, but by and large, labor will be the largest marketing expense for small businesses. Labor is a consistent unit across all farms, so it made it easy for me to do comparisons. Hours are hours on all farms. And then I could have the farm managers, tell their employees that they had to fill out labor logs, which was a benefit to me at that time, because otherwise I was asking the farm managers to do all of the record keeping, which really felt like too much. So this is a labor log. This is how we begin to capture the amount of labor that was devoted to each market channel, and ultimately use it to calculate some basic metrics. So the farm labor would say who they were, so we knew their pay rate and we could charge that amount of time to the channel. How many minutes they spent doing a particular activity. And we can break all these activities into the 4 basic steps of marketing. For vegetables, we include harvest in marketing because you do harvest crops differently for different channels. So it's a channel specific activity, and it's post-production. All the production work is done. We're not weeding, we're not planting, we're not pruning, we're just picking dollars off the plants, right? Taking them in, washing them, packing them, driving them to the market and selling them. So we can break all those activities into 4 basic steps. On the labor log, we get how long they spent, what crop they were handling, what activity they were participating, and then that product that they were handling, in this case, that kale and Swiss chard that they were washing, was destined for which channel. In this case, it was the CSA channel. So very simple way to keep track for 1 week of all our labor and basically tax the channels that we're selling in with that time, the value of that time. So then we can use those measurements for time and sales and the other pieces that we gathered to rank the channels as from best to worst for each individual factor of performance. So we have profit, a simple profit, not a literal farm bottom line profit, but just the simple one using the data points that we have, which was the value of labor spent on that channel, the mileage spent on that channel, subtracted from the total sales that week. We have the total amount of labor that it takes, because there's only so many hours to go around the farm at the end of the week. The volume of product that could be moved in that 1 week period, and then the farmer's ranking for how risky they thought the channel was, and then how well they enjoyed it. If it was a stressful channel or if it was kind of fun to participate in. So when we get all those measurements from 1 week of data collection on the farm, we can come up with real measurements of factor performance. So here we have the sales volume. I've taken their dollars of products sold and converted them into units, so I don't share their income from 2009 this is. But when we turn it into units of consumption, if you will, the CSA channel took 8 units, or 8.3 units. And by contrast, the Watkins Glen Farmers Market just took 1 unit. So the CSA took 8 times the amount of product that farmers market took. You can see that restaurant sales also just took 1 unit, or 1/8 of what the CSA did. And some of those other farmers markets fall in between. So this is, using their own data, we could just really simply come up with a rank here for volume of product sold. And we would say, moving a lot of product is good, right? So the CSA gets ranked 1, the Corning Farmers Market gets ranked 2, and on down the line, with Watkins Glen Farmers Market and restaurant sales being tied for 5th. Move on to the next factor. It's the amount of labor that it took to sell in all these channels during that market. We're going to consider less labor to be a good thing. So restaurant sales, it only took 4 hours. Now remember, over here we said, gee, it looks like this channel may not be so great, right? Because it only takes 1 unit of product. But when we get here and we look at the amount of time spent, okay, actually it might be pretty good because it only took us 4 hours to sell that amount of product. So we're going to say restaurant is the best channel for the amount of labor that it demands on the farm. Remember, CSA took 8 units of product, or the most of any channel, but it only took us 14 hours to sell that product in that channel. And you can see how the other ones shake out. So we're building out a better image of channel performance when we add this next factor in. And we have a ranking for labor. And if all we had was sales and labor, it's very tempting to just use these two numbers. We could get a real definition of performance of these channels for the farm. Let's look at the amount of labor as a percentage of the total amount of labor spent on marketing of each channel. So restaurant sales took 5% of our weekly marketing labor, and we go over to gross sales, and they contributed 6% of our total weekly gross sales. So we look at the restaurant channel just using this two-factor evaluation, and we say restaurants seem pretty strong because they're taking 5% of our time to give us 6% of our weekly income, right? It seems like a strong channel. Likewise, the CSA, it takes 18% of our weekly marketing labor, and it gives us 45% of our weekly income. Seems like a very strong channel. So just using two factors, we can get a pretty good picture of what's going on. Let's pick on the Watkins Glen Farmers Market for a moment. It takes 13% of our weekly marketing labor in order to contribute 5% of our weekly gross sales. This looks like a poor performing channel, right? It's taxing on our time, and it's not really paying its way. But we're going to move on after that, that two-factor evaluation and look at profit. And we're going to call this a third factor, but in essence, it is taking that information from the first two and processing it. So it's the same thing you see on those pie charts. CSA is a very strong channel. We're going to rank it number 1 for profit. That is gross sales minus the value of our labor and our mileage. Restaurant sales come in second, still looking like a strong channel as a percent of gross sales. The amount of money we can retain is strong. And then the rest of those channels carry on. As we expected, as we observed, the Watkins Glen Farmers Market is the poorest performing channel for profit because it takes so much of our time. And if we put a value on our time, then it's a poor performing channel. So again, we got this rank of 1, 2, 3, and on down the line. Now we talk about risks and preferences. The risk is really risk of lost sales, and each channel comes with a kind of risk. Wholesale channels come with what we call buyer back out. Distributor buyers and grocery store buyers are classically known for backing out of a product. Even when you've already harvested, washed, packed, and delivered it, you're at the loading dock, the buyer can walk out and refuse the lot for any number of reasons. We see that in wholesale channels. With direct-to-consumer channels, the risk of lost sales might come from bad weather at your farmer's market, bad weather at your event, and even from things like new competitors and lower prices from competing operations. When it comes to lifestyle preferences, this has to do with what you enjoy doing, because ultimately that's a form of farm sustainability. If you like setting up pretty displays, if you like talking to consumers and answering their questions, then you'd be well suited for direct-to-consumer channels. If you'd really rather be in the field or in the office and you don't really want to deal with people, then you might be more well suited to wholesale channels and so on. So when it came to Muddy Fingers Farm, we just asked them to rank each channel for risk and then for lifestyle. And what we heard from them is that they considered the CSA to be their least risky channel. And then farmers markets and restaurant sales were slightly more risky than that. And they said that actually they enjoy participating in all channels equally. They think they're all fun. We also let them do a factor weight. That means they can weigh certain decision-making factors heavier than others. And we don't have to dwell on that, but it'll show up in the final results. So I walked you through those graphs of each factor and the channels, and we gave them all a rank. And we simply take those ranks and come up with a final score. So what we see in this example from Muddy Fingers Farm is that CSA really performed very well across all factors, and it has the lowest score at the end of a 1.6, meaning it's their best performing channel. It's their most efficient channel. Whether we use all factors weighted equally or we use their own choice of how to weigh the factors, it's just math formula business, we still get the same results with CSA being the best. Restaurant comes in as the next best performing channel for them. And then we have those farmers markets. So, there are differences in the values after the decimal point, but in essence, we could say all the farmers markets were tied for last in terms of overall performance. Now, they had been considering a change, using this data for a practical decision. They were doing too much time on marketing. With the 4 farmers markets and the CSA and restaurant sales, they were really putting a lot of their week's labor into marketing and not enough on production. And they were working from sun up to sundown. So they felt, something needs to change because too much time goes into marketing. My suggestion, of course, was reduce or eliminate the worst performing channel and find a way to increase the best performing channel. And what I told them was, my personal recommendation based off their data was, so you should drop the Watkins Glen Farmers Market. And if you add 12 shares to your CSA, your weekly sales, your weekly income will remain the same, but you'll actually be working 8 to 9 hours less total for the farm on marketing. So that was my suggestion. But I want to tell you, I chose this farm as an example for a reason. That factor really is the heaviest factor. So in this instance, what they said was, well, the Watkins Glen Farmers Market is the only place in the county where we farm that we sell produce. So they said, we feel a commitment to this community and we don't want to stop selling produce in our own community. So we're going to continue to participate in the Watkins Farmers Market, and we're going to try to improve that market. They took over management of the market, tried to get more consumers there as the managers doing more effort on advertising and stuff like that. What they did choose to do, though, is drop the Saturday market at Ithaca, which was actually, while it might seem counterintuitive because the Saturday Ithaca Farmers Market is a really huge market, actually made a lot of sense. It was their most competitive market in terms of other vegetable vendors, and it was on a Saturday. So they chose to drop the Saturday market, get out of a really busy market, and add, I think it was 15 shares to their CSA to compensate for that lost income. They gained Saturdays back and they spent a lot less labor on marketing that way. So ultimately that lifestyle factor made, drove their decision-making and led them to a better decision than just using the numbers. That was really a really successful example from that farm. When you do your own record keeping and your own data collection for making decisions, just remember that assumptions are okay. They replace the need for a high level of detail. Most of us are busy and feel that we can't keep very detailed records, or at least not for very long. So one approach to that is to just pick a snapshot period, like 1 week, like I said. Another is to use assumptions. So when we do the market channel assessment with farms, when we collect data for 1 week, we know that they do have produce in the cooler when that week begins, and we haven't accounted for the labor of harvesting and washing that product in the cooler. But we know at the end of the week, when we're all done, there'll be new product in the cooler that we did capture the labor for. We just call that a wash. We didn't think that any product was wasted. So some people that have done similar research said, well, when a farm brings all this product to the market and then they bring home unsold product, we need to account for that product. But we're going to just say, you put in that amount of labor to sell at the market, and the amount of unsold produce at the end is still what it would take to generate that amount of sales. In other words, how many heads of lettuce does it take to sell 30 heads of lettuce? It might take 35 heads to bring to market because people, they want a choice and they don't want to pick the last kind of raggedy looking head. So that's just what it takes. It's not really wasted. CSA sales are largely done off season when there's less time restriction on the farm, and we'd call that an associated cost. And we don't worry about individual products or weights or prices. We're just capturing total gross sales. So my point here, I'm maybe going into too much detail, but my point here is that you can use assumptions in your own record keeping when you do your own analysis, and that's okay. Don't worry about that. Things that I learned from this research, in addition to the talk about channel selection and evaluating channels, is to remember that your business has control It's easy to think of the market as having control, and almost to think that our businesses are, so to speak, victims of the market, right? These consumers are coming to these markets, there are competitors, and I need to, roll with that. But there are controls available to the farm that can kind of strengthen our position. So of course, you're in control of pricing your product. And as we discussed earlier, you need to support your price with your marketing effort, but you are in control of your price. You're also in control of your pack size or your unit that you sell. So something I sometimes hear from folks is that, people are buying very small amounts of their product. Well, that's only if you make a small amount available, right? You could sell arugula in quarter-pound bags, but if that doesn't work for you, then you make arugula in 1-pound bags, right? It's going to take the full array of marketing techniques that we talked about earlier, but the farm can pick the size and the unit that they sell their product in so as to set the table for success, I guess is what I'm saying. If you're looking at customer transaction size, one thing I did in some recent research was found that 45% of one farm's customers were spending $3 or less at their stall. Well, the farm was offering a lot of items at $1 and $1.50. So there's a lot of busyness and handling of customers for very small cash transactions. That's where that farm could change the pack size. So let me give you an example. They were selling heads of garlic at $1.50 each, and customers would come along and buy 1 head of garlic. If you put those 2 heads of garlic in a pint container, now you have 2 heads for $3. You're increasing your customer transaction size, and that's something that the farm has at their control. Also, the product offering that you use in your different channels is up to you. So just what I mean here is just because you grow it doesn't mean that you need to offer that crop or that product in every single channel that you use. You can be selective, bringing certain cuts of meat to one farmer's market, lower cost items like roasts and ground might make sense for one market. You don't have to lug all your high-end cuts to that one. And then another market, maybe you just bring high-end cuts, or you think about vegetable crops. Just because you produce that product doesn't mean you have to bring it into every channel. You can actually control that a bit. And then finally, setting order minimums for wholesale customers so that you're not making deliveries of very small amounts of product. These are all available to the farm and within your control. Almost done here, just have a couple slides, but this channel combination slide just speaks to the idea of setting first priority customers, first priority channels, and then second priority. So when products are limited, and we're talking about vegetable crops in this example, when it's that early season and let's say raspberries are just beginning to ripen, determining who your first priority channels are that have steady demand. Maybe that's your CSA customers, maybe that's your wholesale customers. And then as more and more ripen and the availability of, the amount that's available increases, you have what you so-called extra produce or, an abundance, then you can begin to make that available in your second priority channels. And give you an example from the raspberries. Worked with a farm who was selling U-pick, but also at farmers markets. And, instinctively we might think to bring those very first ripe raspberries to farmers markets, right? It would be a really hot item early in its season. But what this farm said is, no, when I get those first ripening berries, I leave them in the field because I want my U-pick customers, who are my first priority, I want them to come and have a good experience. So I leave those early berries in the field so there's something for them to pick. And then as I get more and more ripe berries, that's when I begin to harvest them for farmers market, knowing that there'll always be enough for my U-pick customers. That's a way to use channel combinations to move, to sort of optimize moving all your product, and having this second channel as a variable channel. You can still go to the farmer's market, sell other products with or without raspberries in this example, right? So you kind of have this valve that you can sort of open or close with your second priority channels. So here's some summary points about market channel assessment. Really got to identify the goals and the lifestyle preferences that suit your operation, and then keep records, just if only for a snapshot period, it's a period of time, or even a unit of product. You could say, I'm going to keep detailed records while I sell the next 100 units, and then I'm going to stop and use those records and trust them for analysis. Make sure when you're doing comparisons and making decisions that you place a value on your own time, just for the accurate picture of your total marketing costs, put a value on your time. Doesn't mean that you have to literally be writing yourself paychecks. Then you can rank and compare your opportunities and think about how to start tweaking poor performing channels to perform better, and how to increase your participation in strong channels. And ultimately come up with some channel combination that maximizes sales and reduces your risks. I'll just mention there's a publication that I created. It's getting a little old now, but it's still relevant and true. You could find it on the Cornell Small Farms website under their resources, and it's called A Guide to Market Channel Selection. It also has tips on how to sell into wholesale and direct-to-consumer channels. And then finally, if you search the words Cornell Smart Marketing, you'll find a series of articles. And I wrote some, one in March of 2009 and one in October of 2012 on these topics about market channels. So they're like 1 or 2 page reads, and they're pretty succinct on this topic. I want to offer my email to you. If you think of questions later on and you want to run them by me, I hope that all this marketing stuff keeps simmering in your mind for a while, and you can feel free to email me questions. I'm happy to reply by email. So here's my email address. And with that, I'll stop sharing and field questions.
Matt, this is David Cox. I'm in the Otsego office here with a few others. Just in light of your marketing channel selection that you said it's a little bit old. Well, it's maybe so, but what have you observed since then about because I share that all the time with people. I think it's a wonderful application. But so what's happened since? What have you observed since that would be relevant to what you're talking about with the channel selection?
Yeah, I think it's still, I'm thinking about the how-to tips. It's all still very relevant. Again, it describes the market channel assessment tool in that publication, and then it talks about how to begin to get yourself into restaurants, grocery stores, distributors, and so on, picking them up. I'd say the only thing that's probably evolved or changed since the last edition, which was 2014, is everything being online and by text. You can have a relationship now with a restaurant buyer where you're texting them to take orders and stuff. And I guess I didn't really write about that kind of stuff. So that's all I'm thinking when I say it's old.
We have one. Once your business is solvent, how important is ongoing marketing?
Yeah. So my opening slide gave this definition, and it said that marketing is a process of understanding consumers, developing products, and then getting those products to the consumer. So, it's not like production work. Production has a clear beginning and end. You plant a crop and then you harvest it, and production's done. But marketing is going to mean continuously listening to your customers and staying abreast of trends in the marketplace. I do most of my work is with either vegetable or meat farms. Cuts of meat have come in and out of vogue in the last 10 years, right? So just listening, cooking styles have come in and out. People all suddenly bought the Instapot, right? So you'd want to just be listening to what's going on with your consumer. If you know that your consumers are all using Instapots, is there a way that informs the products that you offer, the sizes that you offer, the recipes that you suggest? It's just this process of understanding. And so, I hate to say it, but marketing's never done, because your understanding of the consumer has to stay current.
I answered a question, Matt, about freezer trade.
Oh yeah.
What is it? And
freezer trade is, I guess it's regional slang, but it means selling quarters, halves, and wholes of meat direct to the consumer. So a person buys a quarter of a beef or a half a hog, and just to clarify, that's coming all cut and packaged. It's not a huge chunk, but it's a traditional way to buy meat.
I have a question, Matt. So my name's Kevin, and I'm launching a hot sauce, and I have a batch going. I'm about to go into the kitchen and cook it and package it, but I don't have my label ready yet. The main channel I'm going to use to distribute the product is through, Instagram and Facebook to people I know and friends. But I am going to sell some at one store. And I was wondering if there were any other ways that I could possibly distinguish my product without having a label on it. I mean, I've got this hot sauce here that I was eating with my breakfast that has a nice label that tells about it. Mine won't have that for the first batch. So I was
I
thinking
see.
of perhaps a point of purchase display or something that could describe it, or
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just a problem that you'll have for a short term, it sounds like, because you're eventually going to have a label. But
yeah,
I think you could design, a business card or a brochure to go along with it. Maybe stick it on with a rubber band, something very practical.
okay, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. And ultimately, with your label design, use your target consumer and your strategy sentence to inform the style, right? I mean, I've seen hot sauce labels that are very classy and ornate and use nice fonts, and I've seen them that are cartoony, like with the red pepper cartoon character or a mule or whatever. So that design, the words that are on it, and the font, that's all going to be informed by your target customer. Are they local food folks who are looking to replace a national brand hot sauce with a locally made one? Or are they like hot sauce enthusiasts who want to try every hot sauce, out there, which I know that those people exist. And, this is just an example for me to use that all of that can be informed by your target market identification and really your strategy sentence. So it's kind of cool to think that these decisions can all be guided by target consumers.
Thank you.
When are you starting back at Cornell, Matt?
In January, anyone can email me anytime, and I'm not
Right.
like trying to get new clients here. I'm just saying, I'm happy to answer questions by email. So feel free.
I hope that we can all unmute and thank Matt for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for sticking with it.
Thank
very much.
Thank you really
much.
Thank you. We really appreciate his
Matt.
time and expertise here today. And you'll be hearing more from Matt, and you'll probably be reading some scholarly articles, as he writes and pursues more work at Cornell. But, a lot of our people, not everybody is doing a food product, as you know, but all these principles are, you can apply to your product or service. And, with services, you've got marketing channels as well. I like the Audi example. I thought that was so cool. I was just envisioning if they were taking the coffee into the new car and the ice cream.
I know. I always think about the same thing.
Because there's no eating in my car. But
Same.
anyway, it was really funny. We had some friends. We did the same thing. We went to a farm stand and we got coffee, and the guy took us on this rough road and he spilled his coffee all over my car. And I was really like, I hated to say anything. But anyway, I think that's a great example. And I did want to remind everybody that next week, we want you to present your plan in a few minutes. And I thought David was going to come up with some kind of an outline, but I think you can use your business plan to come up with, use your business plan. You've got your categories, your product and service, your competitive advantage, your marketing profile, and all the things that might be blank right now in the marketing area. There are strategies in there you should be able to come up with. And I hated to limit people too much on time, but we do have a big group. And I was hoping that next week we could, if you look at the agenda, it's presenting your product in just a few minutes and then having others critique. And we will do it the next week after that too, bringing everybody together and making a presentation. So you will be on, in other words, for 3 or 4 minutes. I'm trying to decide how long it might take someone, but try to summarize and practice for 3 minutes, and then other people hopefully will be able to critique constructively and kindly, or ask questions, have you thought of this or that? And then we'll move on to the next person. But I think it's good to get your ideas and product out into the open so that, you know, you're kind of under the gun a little bit, but to push you a little bit to have something concrete that you can say to the rest of us. So I think it will be fun. We did it last year with our group, and it was really fun, and it was really hard to cut people off, you know, but we're gonna try to do, I'm thinking 3 minutes. So if you can take the business plan outline and just put together, I mean, our hot sauce guy, Kevin seems to be ahead of the game here. But maybe Kevin, maybe you can come up with some kind of a label that you know, if you have your label. If you want to share your screen, you can do that. If you have something you would like to share on the screen, you're welcome to. I can make you a co-host. Or you can just talk into your screen, into your camera. So we just want to make it as interactive and fun as possible. And we do want to be kind also in our critique. And so think about that for next week. We've got 3 hours, so maybe 3 minutes is not giving you enough time, but I think you've been working on this plan hopefully for a little while. You can invite other people to join up if you want. We hope to have some IDA people and some other people, and our extension people will be on too. You're also welcome, Matt.
Thanks. I want to chip in their 3 minutes. They should share their strategy sentence. That way they can work on a strategy sentence. And here's my advice to people is, if you write a strategy sentence that sounds nice enough to put on Facebook, it's not good enough. You need to drill down and draw that caricature that you wouldn't want to share with your customer. Then you know you've got a good
character.
one.
The character idea is really good. So let's you know, it's nasty weather now. It's not going to be very nice for a few days. So kind of hone down your ideas, and we will talk to you next week. Thank you again, Matt.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.